kicked out in the basement of my house here. My circuit breaker tripped. Don't know why. Probably has nothing to do with the electrician who was just fiddling with it earlier today. So that's just a coincidence, I'm sure. In any case, here we are back. So, scope. We were talking about scope. So, in particular, again, we don't have to. Obviously, we're not going to plan out all of
All of
the
film
second
film
age,
framing.
right? Um, but if we have, but it seems important for us to have some idea of, like, if we're gonna preserve the chronological order, right? We're already up to 2952. Um, how like what things do we have to save, and how long do we need to save them for? Um, uh, anyway, so there are definitely some issues where we're going to want to think. I mean, we may want to give some thought into, is there a point in the, late third age progress there that we want to time the end of the first age with, right? Um, One thing that occurs to me as a possibility is the actual engagement between Aragorn and Arwen as
Hmm.
a possible end point of the. And we may do it sooner, but again, I'm just trying to think, because that's kind of an important turning moment, right?
Yeah.
When the sort of the pledge that they take together, and because that's sort of I mean, you could say that that's a sort of a moment where, like, the concerted opposition against Sauron kind of gets real at that moment, right? When Aragorn, like, sets out on his trajectory to do his thing, and Arwen with him, and whatever that would look like if Tolkien had ever written that, and that kind of thing.
It's also good to tie into that Erendil and Elwing story, which will
Yeah.
be part of that last season of the first stage.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that engagement, which is him coming back from his travels as Thorongil and saying, "All right, I'm making my choice," and Arwen makes her choice. And since we've been paralleling their two stories throughout these frames through the first stage,
Mm-hmm.
that's a very good end point for our eclectic, disconnected frames as well.
Right. Right.
And that okay. So here's the big question, right?
Okay.
Where does that happen in relation to the childhoods of the various adult characters, human characters that we meet in Lord of the Rings?
Yes.
Because we do want to make sure that we're able to tell a story to little Eomer and Eowyn, and tell a story to little Faramir and Boromir.
So, 29. So I had gotten my Appendix B out to look
Yeah,
at these things. So I never remember the dates offhand. 2980. So 2952 is where we'd gotten with the meeting of Aragorn and
yeah,
Arwen. 2980 is the engagement. And so, as far as where that is, Faramir is born in 2983.
right,
Boromir's 2, right? He was
yeah,
born in 2978.
okay,
Um, Denethor has just
and
gotten married 4 years before.
yeah, and Eomer and Eowyn are certainly younger than they. I've
Oh
got
yeah,
it.
no, yeah, exactly. Aemir is not going to be born for another 11 years, and Eowyn for
Okay,
another 15 years.
Yeah,
all
and
right,
that's the same year that Samwise Gamgee is born.
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and Frodo's 12
Hmm.
at the
So it's
time of the
about the
engagement.
time his parents die. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so, um, yes, yes.
okay.
Um,
In other words, it's a really good cutoff point.
Yes, that is essentially what I was looking for, is
because
to
it
make
does
sure that.
mean that our second age frames could focus on, as you say, on, like, young. We could get a number of frames of, like, what's happening in the House of Theoden, um,
Yeah,
with young Eowyn and Aemir, brought into the king's household when Aemon dies, right? That's one obvious kind of frame that we could do. Boromir and Faramir, lots to do there, of course, as well as what's happening in the Shire.
hmm
Stories of young Samwise and young Frodo getting beaten by Farmer Maggot and all kinds of things like that. So there's yeah. So if we think of those things, like if the Second Age is basically focused on the childhood
of our
stories
of our characters,
of the Third Age heroes,
we have to be careful with hobbits though, because our main touch point there is Bilbo, and I think it's pretty clear from the narratives we have that Bilbo doesn't really care that much about the Second and Third Ages. He's way more interested in the First Age.
Focused on the First Age, right?
I mean, that's what the narrative tells me, the way that the narrative is structured.
Right. But again, we'll have plenty of opportunity to emphasize the, I'm thinking of the Numenor story. We can get lots of human frames for Numenor stories, and
and we can give Bilbo an interest in something that happens in the Second Age.
Right, sure.
He might care about the rings,
right? Or ironically, he could not care at all about the It's right. In fact, how awesome
I don't think he does.
Like to give Bilbo a line that says like, "Rings of I've never been interested in the Rings of Power. I just don't care much about the Rings of Power." Yeah, that'd be funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, which could be kind of almost like a I don't want to know anything because I don't want to find out anything.
Yeah.
But so I think if we cut off at the end of the Adventures of Thorongil at the end of the First Age, then we have the opportunity to move into a new chapter, and we'll still have Aragorn as a character throughout the Second Age frames.
Yes,
because he has at this point met Gandalf and the court in Gondor and the court in Rohan, and he knows all those characters.
Yeah,
he can go visit all those places. I don't think we're going to send him to the Shire at any point, but we could send him to Bree.
Right, I mean, he could be nearby for sure.
Right.
Yeah, he wouldn't be. So. They wouldn't get to know him. Yeah. Okay. So thinking then. So back to the First Age. The whole Thorongil sequence is potentially a multiple frame, like a multiple season frame potential.
It's also potentially very heavy with season 3-itis.
It depends what we do with it, but
it depends what we do with it.
Or you don't get to tell very much of a story with it at all, which is would be sad.
So
there's
do you
three
mean
main
you're suggesting we
parts of
would
the
want to save that story to be told in full in a season in a Third Age season?
I would rather tell it as a story for real. Now, of course, we don't have a lot, right? But I don't think
we would have to make up stuff just to do it.
I was going to
say, but by the time we get to there, we'll be quite used to not having
so
stuff.
used to that. It's going to be easy.
Yeah.
Cake.
There's three main parts of the Thorongil story, and the first part is in Rohan.
Yep.
And the second part is in Gondor.
Yeah.
And then the third part is when he goes adventuring to the east and the south, right?
Yeah.
So at the very minimum, we would have to do 3 frame stories to tell those different stories, right? And alternatively, we could leave one of them out. Like, so we could do the Rohan and Gondor one, and then in the frame, he goes off to parts unknown, which leaves room to, in the Third Age, when we catch up to him, do a Thorongil adventures story in Harad or wherever he goes.
Right. So the important thing about it, though, is that the Thorongil story is kind of what cements him as the character that we meet in the Lord of the Rings, and we have to make sure that we're sensitive to that, because the whole purpose in playing the long game with Aragorn has been so that we don't have to do the mopey kind of, I don't know if I should be king kind of thing. By the time we meet him in Fellowship of the Ring, it would be great if he's like, no,
he's worked out all that stuff already.
I'm ready. I'm ready to do this. Let's do it.
Right. So I there are 2 reasons why I agree with you about the Thorongil thing. That is to say, not doing too much of the Thorongil story in frames, both because not only because it's gonna, I I think that whole Thorongil sequence would make a great season, basically, and I wouldn't want to spoil it by just trying to squeeze it into a frame. And I think we could have time to do a whole Thorongil season or something like a whole Thorongil season. There'd be other things going on too, but that seems like a thing that we could do. The other reason not to do it is that it would be, there's a lot of story that we'd have to cover, right? And again, I'm inclining towards, when I'm thinking about what kind of things I want to do, it's not exactly, again, I think back to the coolest frames that we've had, the most successful frames that we've had. And they're not like, let's tell a major important story in the history of the Third Age, right? It's when we are either making up a small incident or doing something sort of tangential. Like we're reflecting on the Hobbit in the Fourth Age frame, but we're not telling a story that happened, that was a major thing. So I think we do a similar thing in hey Dave, welcome. Rather than saying let's cover, so we're talking about the scope of the frame, Dave, and so we're kind of thinking ahead. The proposition was that we end the First Age with, so the frame of the final season of the First Age is the engagement sequence between Aragorn and Arwen, which is in 2980 of the Third Age, so we still have a little bit of play between here and there for the next 6 seasons. And this has led us to what we are currently discussing, which is the Thorongil issue, right? The whole story of the adventures of Aragorn as Thorongil and Rohan and Gondor and the East and South beyond. And we're kind of inclining towards not doing frames there so that we can save to do a whole season on it later. And also because I was also just arguing that it would be too plot heavy, most likely, to try to cover that. And that, again, the trend has not been, our best frames have not been trying to cover a major event in the history of the Third Age, but rather sort of sampling from moment, doing some like sort of character studies or, touching on moments or themes or concepts like Sauron is returning. What's that like? Right. That's more of a, like, trying to capture the spirit of that moment in history rather than trying to cover a plot point that gets mentioned in the Tale of Years at the end. Right. And I think we'd be better served. So again, rather than trying to do a whole series of Thorongil frames, it would be better, I think, to try to be looking at, we could even do frames in which Thorongil appeared as a character, but not where we're like trying to cover the events. You know what I mean?
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that especially.
Like we could do a young Denethor frame.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
In which Thorongil appears as a character, or maybe people just talk about him. Maybe it's like post Thorongil and Denethor's talking about him.
Yeah.
So if we do Thorongil as a story, like in a main season, that season will fall between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
So that will be our bridge. So we'll do one season on The Hobbit, one season on Thorongil, or The Adventures of Aragorn, or however you want to put it.
Yeah.
And then 6 seasons on Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we would be using the Thorongil material to set up not just Aragorn as a character, but also what is Rohan, what is Gondor,
Yes.
who is Saruman, who's Gandalf,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
And I think it gives us a chance to I think it would be really great to kind of use that to explore some Arthurian stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be really interesting.
That would be fun. Would be fun. And the thing that I love about the idea of doing a Thorongil season like that is that it brings us to approaching the Lord of the Rings story from a totally different perspective, right? Like, if we have Bilbo's party in the context of like where our viewers have already seen like the War of the Ring beginning in preparation, right? They're already familiar with all the pieces on the board. And now it's like, meanwhile, there's a birthday party in Hobbiton.
Remember these guys?
Right. And so like, and to begin to see how these pieces then fit into the board. So basically in the books, right? And, and the films.
Shadow of the past.
Right, exactly. Well, basically we're always seeing things from the point of view of, I mean, this is like, Mike Trout's famous observation, right? That Tolkien always in the Lord of the Rings uses as the point of view character, the person who knows least. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the way that the narrative is approached throughout the Lord of the Rings. We'd be approaching it from a different perspective, where the viewers would constantly know way more than everybody else. So we would still see Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin stumbling into the wider world and not really understanding what's going on, but our viewers would know much more. That's
and they would be really
anyway.
Concerned for them in ways that you're not when you're reading the Lord of the Rings for the first time. When you read the Lord of the Rings after you finished it, when you go back and you reread it, then these guys have no idea what they're getting into. Like, way more about how dangerous this world they're stepping out into is. Whereas when you read the Lord of the Rings for the first time, you feel like you're reading a sequel to The Hobbit, right up until the part that the Black Riders show up, and then you realize, so this is not that sort of story.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's great. I exactly. I think that will be a really fun kind of point of view. And as I say, it's almost inescapable, given that it's going to be like season 24. So like, guess what? People who have gotten that far will know a whole lot more than, Sam and Merry and Pippin.
Right. If somebody's been watching our show and had never read Lord of the Rings, how by season 20 have they not read a Lord of the Rings?
Right, exactly. Come on now.
If they haven't cracked open Lord of the Rings by then, we have completely failed.
Yes, exactly. So okay. So
we can safely assume some familiarity with the source material.
Exactly. All right. So we don't have to lay out the frame topics for the next 6 seasons, obviously.
No.
But I'm actually going to advance a slide now. Actually 2 slides, because we'll go back to the themes, but the suggestions, right? These are some of the major things that are happening in the years immediately following, right? In the 3 years after, so 2952 is the date of our last frame, right? So in the next couple years, you've got the White Council responding to the threat of Sauron by doing nothing. This is Saruman's big "the ring has rolled down the river to the sea" speech, right? We have Gandalf meeting Aragorn for the first time, and we have Aragorn setting off on his own. The beginning of the Thorongil sequence, right? Those are the biggest things. Also, I would add to the list Mount Doom erupting, which happens in 2954, right? So that's an interesting big deal. Again, so just looking at putting actual dates to it again, 2952 is where we were. 2953 is the last meeting of the White Council with Saruman's big speech. 2954 is Mount Doom erupting again. And then 2956 is Aragorn meets Gandalf, and then 2957 forward is Aragorn undertaking his great journeys and errantries, as Tolkien says in Appendix B. So, yeah.
One thing that I think would be really interesting is to end this season with the eruption of Mount Doom and have the next season kind of react to that in a way, in the way that people are kind of reacting to the Near-Ninth,
right,
in the following season. I think that would be really interesting.
It would be.
Yeah, I think Rob Harding had suggested that as well.
Yeah.
That having Mount Doom erupting be kind of the sign of doom at the end of the season, and then find some other event to contrast with it to get our message of, but there's still hope. Probably like maybe Gandalf meets Aragorn or something, but to have the eruption of Mount Doom and then a final note of hope.
So just to be obvious about it, given that hope is our theme, involving Estelle at some point seems like a chip shot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so yes, involving. I don't think that Gandalf meeting Aragorn need necessarily be a huge event, right? That could be something that could be squeezed into a thing, right?
Especially if it's Gandalf's story. Meeting with Aragorn for the first time would be I met a new guy today.
Right.
So one of the things about the theme of hope in the season, though, is the contrast between Amdir and Estelle, and it would be really interesting if, and I think this is coming from the message boards in some way. It would be really interesting if we started out with the council discussing what they're going to do, right? And it doesn't work out the way that Gandalf hoped it would, Amdired it would. And then he doesn't even have to meet Aragorn. All we have to do is show him at the end, perhaps like right, because like let's say the mountain erupts and Gavin's also like, well, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do now? And then we show Aragorn to tie him into, be like, but Estelle, right? I mean, you could have him meet him there, and we could play with a little fast and loose with the timeline there and have him meet him right then. Depending on how hard we want to hit that with a hammer.
Right. I mean, we don't know anything really about the circumstances of Aragorn meeting Gandalf. It just says they meet and their friendship begins is the only entry in Appendix B for that. So, yeah, I mean, I think we have some freedom to kind of do that wherever. We just know that it's right after that, probably uncoincidentally right after that Aragorn begins his Thorongil trajectory. Okay, so, but I would note
a series of White Council meetings also has almost the exact right amount of tension and movement that we would want to have in the frame story for a season.
Yeah, I think that using the White Council now is probably time. It's something that's been suggested for the frame in the past, and we've always gone with something else. But at this point, I think we're there. I think we need to have Elrond, Galadriel, Gandalf, Saruman talking. I mean, Círdan, who's actually around for some of this stuff as well, talking through what. Yeah, but I meant Círdan's around in the first age.
Yes.
Yeah. But yes, Radagast should be at the council, at least some of the time. So we can see how these characters are thinking through their dilemma, and leading up to the Near Knife is probably a good time for that. Because, I mean, we're going to have a lot of main story characters trying to figure out what to do and making different choices. So if the people at the council have different opinions, that fits.
Fits with the Union of Maedhros.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Would like every frame scene be set at a White Council meeting?
Not necessarily.
But we could have a bunch of them.
They're just passing the talking stick around episode by episode.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking if you wanted to use it to do something where we could do cameos of Thorongil, but not be following Thorongil around, this seems like doing like White Council meetings seems like the opportune way to be like, this episode this person shows up, and then next episode a different character passes through.
I was joking, but it would be kind of funny actually to have like every episode's frame be like a little miniature bottle episode of like what that member of the White Council, feels and contributes. So there's like, here's the Radagast speech, here's the Círdan speech, here's the...
Yeah, or it's just the same meeting from different perspectives.
Right.
That would be really. I was thinking about that too. What if it was just one meeting the whole? That maybe that's too hard, but one meeting the whole season.
Yeah,
I mean,
like
it could. It could definitely be done. You could have a single event take place over the course of a season. You could do it.
Especially when we have this many different points of view to play with.
Imagine like a Galadriel speaking in favor of Gandalf being in charge. One episode where Gandalf it's Gandalf's point of view, and then
I vote for what's the word? I move for a vote of no confidence in Wizard Saruman's leadership.
And then imagine like the next episode is from Saruman's point of view, and he sees like we see Galadriel and Gandalf whispering and scheming.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, from his perspective, that's got to be how he sees that.
Mm-hmm.
Like their relationship is weirdly close.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the scenes with Gandalf and Galadriel in the Hobbit films actually make a lot of sense from Saruman's point of view as what he's seeing across the room.
Yes.
Like that kind of like weirdly pseudo romantic kind of
right.
body language.
At White Council meetings, do they have like a no telepathy rule? Like, is that like part of the house rules or something? Like, is it like passing notes?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we could do some like off time from the council. We don't have to be like actually at a council meeting the whole time.
Right. Well, ultimately that's kind of what my thoughts was, that we would have some personal moments with some asides and some
White
people
Council coffee break.
Yeah, and sometimes somebody would come in with some message about something that's going on out there in the wider world. Legolas shows up, or there could be some really interesting stuff that you could do with that.
Gandalf's showing them some pipe weed.
Yeah. Gandalf gets Saruman addicted to pipe weed.
Yes.
Well, don't even get me started on the Unfinished Tales stuff from that same. Like, the accounts that we get of Gandalf and Saruman at this meeting in Unfinished Tales are some of my that makes my bottom 5 of like least favorite things that Tolkien wrote, actually, because it makes no sense at all. Like the idea of like Saruman and Gandalf exchanging like references to the Rings of Power and stuff. It just like to me it does not make a bit of sense in the timeline of what Gandalf was supposed to know when that gets established elsewhere. I don't think it works. Maybe I'm just misunderstanding it, but I don't think it works. Anyway, but the point is there's a whole big smoking and smoke ring blowing element there. So yeah, that's actually authorial. When did we say we were going to situate this in the chronology? I'm sorry, I missed it. So the council meeting is 2953. So it's the year after the meeting of Aragorn and Arwen, which we did in the last. So it's a very logical next step to do. So
we would get to do. So that should allow us to portray like Saruman's withdrawal, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah.
This is about the time he starts fortifying Isengard.
Yeah. So we could do like he's there at the meeting or meetings in like the first half of the season, and somewhere 2/3 of the way through the season he stops showing up.
Yeah. Or
explain why
at least at some point the actor who's going to eventually play Bill Ferny shows up to whisper something in his ear to give him
that guy shows up too.
But
and it's like his father, like Bill Ferny's dad.
Yeah. Fred Ferny.
We're trying to show that the White Council's never going to meet again. This is it. So
Yeah.
something that is falling apart is also what we would be portraying.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that's where the Union of Maedhros is kind of going to play
Yep.
nicely, because while those alliances are made in more or less good faith, with a notable exception, the overall result is the whole thing falls apart.
Right.
And here's something interesting also. Galadriel is kind of Maedhros in this setting. She thinks that she's the guy, the person. Inclusive language and all that.
Yes.
She thinks she's the person. And now that doesn't mean that she is willing to cede leadership to a great friend, Gandalf, in the same way that Maedhros is willing to cede leadership to Fingon, but Maedhros still thinks he's the guy.
Right.
And also Galadriel's going to fail in this in the same way that she's going to in the main story, as we decided last time.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's going to be
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm cool with this. I mean, so the White Council's scene, it checks a lot of boxes for both like things to avoid and things to do in a frame, right?
Mhm.
It checks the chronology box. It checks the not too much action has to occur box, right? So that's good. It checks the this isn't gonna spoil a story that we're gonna want to do in full when we get to the Third Age thing, because the White Council is a big deal, but it's not a big story, really.
And it can happen in between other stories without us losing anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, there's going to be somebody who like picks apart the show and figures out how to watch the whole thing chronologically, right? It's like, okay,
Right.
all right. You get to this episode, you stop it here, then you go back to this episode over here, and you start it at this timestamp, and you watch it
Right.
until this timestamp, and then you go back to this. Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
It's going to be awesome. Yeah. Yeah. As an extra, we could include just the frames.
A guide.
To facilitate.
Or just the frames, yeah.
Yeah. To facilitate chronological viewing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So,
by the way, I feel like there's a lot of Amdir to Estelle potential here.
Yeah.
There certainly is.
It's
Yeah.
like start of the season is like, hey, we're getting all the big hitters in the room. We're gonna figure this out.
Yeah.
End of the season, things fall apart, but there's like Gandalf will identify some glimmer of hope that
Yeah.
Well, the really reason that it failed is because they didn't have any hobbits there.
Yep.
Clearly.
Yeah.
But the end of the frame for season 6 was Aragorn going off into the wild to adventure on his own now. It was also Arwen deciding, hey, maybe the elves don't need to instantly flee Middle-earth because there's absolutely no hope of survival. Maybe we should stick around and try and do something about this and fix the problem. And maybe with men that'll work.
In which case, Arwen should totally be at the council.
I was
Why
about
would she
to say,
not go?
She's certainly part of Elrond's entourage.
yeah. So
Gotta be, right?
she would be very much in favor of Elrond attending this council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is where I was going.
Right.
And I don't know what her brothers feel about White Council meetings. They seem the type that would find them boring. And pointless. Like, I'll just go kill some orcs. I don't need your council meeting.
Right.
Types. But she's going to be very much in favor of this council happening and of Elrond participating in it and of them moving forward on the let's fix the Sauron problem that we're all ignoring. So she's going to be extremely disheartened when the thing goes nowhere.
Right.
And
Okay.
Elrond or Gandalf has to still have hope at the end of it. And I mean, Arwen can't lose hope entirely.
Well, I feel like Elrond does. Like he's got his whole card, which is Aragorn.
Yeah.
And he believes in Aragorn.
Exactly. Elrond was the one who was able to pass hope on to Arwen, saying like, "Look, we don't need to give up just quite yet." So
Let's
Elrond's not going to lose hope during this council.
right. Let's look at the text for a second.
Oh,
because we here have the unusual luxury of being able to read the entire source text. Here's the 2953 entry in the Tale of Years. Last meeting of the White Council. They debate the rings. Saruman feigns that he has discovered that the One Ring has passed down Anduin to the sea. Saruman withdraws to Isengard, which he takes as his own, and fortifies it. Being jealous and afraid of Gandalf, he sets spies to watch all his movements, and notes his interest in the Shire. He soon begins to keep agents in Bree and the South Farthing. Now, the latter parts of that seem beyond our scope. Those are like what his fear and jealousy of Gandalf lead him to do is what happens afterwards, right?
Yes.
But we can be setting that up a little bit.
I feel like he can't leave until the final episode, though, because that's when it's most traumatic for him to do so. And that's the evidence that it hasn't worked, right? That's the evidence that the thing is falling apart.
We could parallel it with the with Oldor's treachery, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say about the time we want Saruman to leave is probably about the time Uldor kills his father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Then we have.
So it's not necessarily the very end, because we can still have the eruption of Mount Doom as the
Yeah.
we're all in trouble.
Okay. So the beginning of
the beginning of the end, not
right.
the end.
So the beginning of episode 13, the beginning of episode 13 frame should be kind of like along the lines of, well, what do we do now?
So,
because that's
I'm not convinced that we have Mount Doom erupt in this season. It's it's fun.
It doesn't have to. It's certainly.
But I feel like we'd be shoehorning it in because, and what's more, I think there's more opportunity. I'd rather go back to the east, and have a whole other frame, like we had one in Harad. I'd rather have one in Rune, which like is all about the eruption of Mount Doom, and like we saw like some of the early stages. Let's check back in and see the more advanced stages of Sauron having publicly declared himself and taken over, and now there being active recruitment and everything. Anyway, we don't have to do that, but I would be tempted to do something like that, to like have the eruption of Mount Doom be really the core of an entire frame episode, or season rather, than just being stuck in at the end. Especially because if we think about the sequence, right? If we want to do the White Council and then the eruption and then Estel after that, we're ending up squeezing a lot into this frame.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think that the White Council meeting itself might be enough.
Especially with leaving the door open to introduce any side characters we might want to.
Yeah.
In each episode. Like each episode could have its own little focus.
Yeah.
So that gives us a lot of flexibility to cover whatever parts of the story we want to cover. Gandalf could have spoken to someone from the east or the south at some point and brought news with him to the council about this. That type of thing. We can bring in other parts of the world and the story through the characters who are at the council, not necessarily showing other places.
Yeah.
We should totally bring back one of our Harad protagonists.
Oh yeah.
So
I want to involve him thoroughly in the Thorongil plotline.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's
we've got to set up some more of those, by the way. We got to sprinkle some of those around.
One of the reasons I think it'd be fun to go to Rune, but anyway, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So there's two brothers from Harad, right? And the younger brother was the one who ended up being the traitor, and he's the one who's going to be the mouth of Sauron someday. So we will see him again, although we probably won't recognize him. The older brother is currently living in the court in Gondor. The other thing that happened about this with the Steward of Gondor and the King of Rohan, they both die.
Right.
This year.
Yes.
The same year the council's happening.
Yeah.
So we are now putting Ecthelion II as Steward of Gondor and Thengel as King of Rohan. So they're brand new leaders, and that would be something the council would want to talk about, probably. So Gandalf, having visited his good buddy, the guy from Harad, in the court in Gondor, would have interacted with Ecthelion too, and that kind of thing. Like we can bring that political stuff into the council meeting, I think.
Yep. Yeah, it would be something. I mean, it's one of the things they would be discussing, the potential. What resources do they have for war against Sauron would have to be a thing that would come up, right?
Right, and how willing would they be to get involved in this? Because the leaders before them were, well, in the case of the Steward of Gondor, he was quite old. I forget how old Turgon is when he dies, but it's old. So the idea of an extremely elderly Steward of Gondor, like mustering up the army to go do something about Sauron in the last year of his reign, seems unlikely. But once his son takes over and has this very international court, which he is known to have, like that's how Thorongil gets a spot on there, is that Ecthelion is like, hey, I'll collect knights from anywhere.
Right.
He probably has some guy from Rune in there. Like, it's a thing he's doing. So that's gonna play into this is an encouraging piece of news, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, Gandalf could have some good things to say about the potential for Ecthelion's court. Yeah. Okay.
So without with no Mount Doom erupting, or like the climax of the frame will essentially be the collapse of the council.
And the withdrawal of Saruman,
And sort of, and that would happen, like we would want that to happen in the wake of like a series, maybe spread across several episodes of just like bad news just rolling in.
Yeah.
And then and from the point of view of like, I don't know, a Gandalf or an Arwen or somebody who's holding on to the like optimism in the Amdir, watching like all this bad news roll in, and then witnessing that it looks like this group of people aren't going to work together to do anything about it. That would be sort of the collapse of the that would be sort of the low point before like something recovers at the end.
We could still do Aragorn coming through. Like, we could still do the meeting with Aragorn. Well, I say coming through. Pause for a second. Where are we? Where does this take place, do you think?
Good question.
If Saruman's in charge, you'd think he would hold it at his own house, which means Isengard.
But that
How
makes
do you
his
withdraw if
withdrawal
you're hosting
kind
it?
of...
Exactly.
Guess
like, that is gonna shift how we tell the story if we pick that as the
I'll
last.
tell you. Well, who called this meeting? Is the big question, because
Galadriel does.
So if it's Galadriel, you know where I want to hold it? Dol Guldur.
Is that currently uninhabited at this point in the story?
Well, they just tossed the necromancer out of there, what, 10 years ago?
Yeah, but how long does it stay uninhabited?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head, but
yeah, I mean, I'm sure it probably still is, because like you said, it was only 10 years past that. But at one point,
Amul or whoever.
Maybe we can just we can just use the Hilton down the road from it.
Right? Yeah. Radagast's house.
Radagast's house. There you go.
If
Have Radagast host it.
If Galadriel's calling it, why wouldn't it be in Lothlorien?
That's a good question.
Although I guess
it's hard for
random people
to show up.
Yeah,
That's
a good point. Yeah, you can't just have like just like, oh, this messenger just rolled in.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Hard to set a meeting in a place where time operates differently than it does outside.
Oh God, okay. Yeah, this would be the world's worst long meeting.
2951 is when the Nazgul go back to Dol Guldur.
Okay, so they've just gotten back.
So they're already there.
They're already there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, let's not hold the meeting in the Hilton down the road from Dol Guldur.
It would be awkward. It would be. What if we went the other way? What if we have the meeting?
Grey Havens.
No, not so far the other way.
Okay.
Because look, let's face
Rivendell.
it, the Grey Havens, they're convenient on the road to Valinor, but they're convenient nowhere else, right?
Right.
The
They're not
Shire,
really
I
on
suppose,
the way.
but yeah,
The Shire is on the way to the Grey Havens.
exactly.
The Grey Havens is not on the way to anything.
Exactly. Graves is on the way to anything except Valinor. So,
Yeah.
so no, I was thinking, what about? So, I mean, Nick, you were thinking of like symbolic locations for them to hold it, right? What about Eregion?
Hmm.
Eregion is geographically convenient
And
and symbolically interesting.
And we would have the final scene at the end of Lord of the Rings of the three of them, I mean, Gandalf, Galadriel, and Celeborn sitting together and
Mm.
having their final little telepathic meeting. And
In, like,
that's on the road.
The same
It's-
spot. Yeah.
It's in Eregion, yeah?
It's in Eregion.
Where
yeah.
So if we're going to have the final White Council meeting be there and then their final parting be
Mm.
there as well.
Again, the
that
one
might-
thing the text tells us is that they discuss the rings. Presumably they're discussing other things too, but they come and discuss the rings. Kind of fun to actually have it in, like,
Eregion.
the ruins of Celebrimbor's city, basically.
Mm.
Um,
Well, that makes more sense. Because I was like, what are they having this in a campsite? Like, but I guess
they're elves. They've got time. Not
Yeah.
only could they put up a pavilion, they could
yeah.
build a
So-
village.
The argument could be that no one wants to have it at home because that would draw too much attention to their spot. Like Rivendell's kind of supposed to be a secret location,
Right.
and
Yeah.
if
Everyone's
Elrond invites
converging on it.
literally everyone to Rivendell, then maybe that makes the enemy look at Rivendell. But if
Yeah.
they hold the meeting in the ruins of Eregion and then everyone goes home after,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if the villains show up in Eregion because nobody's
Right.
there anymore.
Right.
So yeah,
And
that,
again-
that
and
might
there's-
be a reason to do. Yeah, set up a pavilion, have a temporary encampment.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's a great kind of like Last Alliance themed place to have a meeting, right? To talk about the war. I mean, it's the place where Sauron invaded before, so we're thinking about fighting off Sauron and his return, and
And you have good places like Galadriel could literally be standing in Celebrimbor's forge, and
Yeah.
somebody could walk in and talk to her. Like there could be
Lots
there's a
of
lot
fun
opportunity
locales.
there. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
lots of fun
And-
locales.
And
If-
as you know, Moria is only like a 20-minute walk from
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, it's
So-
just on the path. Yeah, very convenient.
Mhm.
Right. So
It's actually one of the extracurriculars that they arrange for during the meeting.
That's
yeah,
right.
you have your little excursions.
Optional walking tour to Casa Doom.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Whoa,
Marie, you
hang
were-
on,
go.
hang on. Where are we in relation to when Balin goes back to Khazad-dûm?
Before.
That happens
Before.
after this.
Yeah, that should be after
okay.
this.
Okay.
But
That would've
I
been
forget
Not
the year.
much, but yeah, it
Yeah,
will
let
be.
me check the year.
A few decades, because it was 30 years, wasn't it?
I feel
Before
like,
the Lord of the Rings.
and it's 70 in between, so we're probably about 60 before Lord of the Rings now.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, all right. So then
Yeah.
we're off by.
We're still
by a bit.
pre-Balin.
I think
Okay.
so.
It would have been kind of fun to have him wander through. I mean, it's not like you can't.
2989 is his expedition to Moria.
Okay. Yeah, we're
All
safe.
right. Sorry, I super interrupted you, Marie.
Oh, I think I was merely going to say about the other thing about hosting is not just like for safety reasons, but they've got a very prickly, sensitive leader of the group. So if anybody else tries to play host,
Mm,
he might like pout a little bit about it not being his place.
Yeah.
And they kind of all know this.
Yeah.
So the choices were going to be, it's got to be an Isengard
Or a neutral site.
or a neutral site. And
Yeah.
Galadriel's the one calling the meeting, so she
Yeah.
can't call it at Isengard.
Right.
and
Right.
and of all the people at this meeting, it's probably most inconvenient for her because she's got to
Just
get
across the
across.
mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
But-
easy for Saruman to get there. It's I mean, it's convenient. It is geographically it's not. I mean, the Grey Havens is close to nowhere, but it's closer to that than anywhere on the other side of the mountains would
Right.
be.
At least
And-
it's on the correct side of the mountains for the Grey Havens. So Radagast and Galadriel have to cross the mountains.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But
and
Galadriel's
Radagast
not
could
going
have been
far
anywhere.
geographically. It's just crossing the mountains, and then she's practically there.
Right.
And
so it's,
and if Lord of the Rings tells us anything, then she could just kind of like scoot right over the snow and everything's fine.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
The main thing is that the high pass is more or less safe now because the goblins got cleaned out
Mm.
12
Still
years ago.
comparatively recently.
Yeah, like obviously that's not going to last, but for
Radagast
now,
could comment on that.
right.
Great
Yeah.
news. We're not having any more of these.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Who,
okay. So Aregian's not a bad setting.
Who's running security at this thing?
What do you mean by that?
I don't know. It seems like you probably want to have this location be pretty secure, you know.
Mhm.
Like, but it kind of makes it like who gets. That's another one of those like who gets
Who
to
brought the
bring-
army?
Yeah, who gets to bring their army to surround
Who
everybody?
has an army? Galadriel has.
Galadriel has an army.
Elrond
and-
has a little tiny army. Like
Yeah,
he has
yeah.
Glorfindel.
This
Who an army unto himself. Let's
I
be
kind of,
honest.
yeah. So,
Saruman
So, hang
doesn't
on a
have
second.
anything he
And
wants to admit
Glorfindel's
to.
here, right? Like, isn't
Well,
he?
that
The
was going to be
one-man
my next
army.
question. Who's invited?
Oh yeah.
yeah.
The main players, obviously. Like we know the main cast. We know that all three
Gildor.
known to star. By the way, Blue Wizards.
I think that they should. I think
never
that one of them
RSVP.
could make an appearance and then storm out
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
wanted. If we really wanted one
Or
to
just-
be there.
Or just stop by, be like, "Oh, I'm not staying." One episode stops. We get an
Yeah.
episode where the blue.
I feel like they go east and south and they never come all the way back this far west.
It is very far.
This is, yeah. So they could send a message. So we
Okay.
could get a
Yeah.
message from one
Our
of the Blue Wizards.
condolences. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. Sorry,
I
regrets.
don't care about
but,
your stupid meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe they
Yes,
send
the
some,
cat is wearing a cone of shame.
they send
Eregion
some,
is.
they
It's
send
so,
some snacks.
it's so
from-
the cat won't scratch his poor little ears.
Yeah.
He has a little bit of a scratching
Little
his ears and
bit of an
losing all
issue.
the fur issue.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
For
So
his own sake.
It's true that Eregion is not convenient for Rune, but you know.
But
what
that
can
we
you
could
do?
get a message. We could mention the Blue
We
Wizards.
get a message.
But until
Radagast
we
can
figure
come
out
with a
what their
message or
story is,
something.
I don't want to put one of them on screen right now
Yeah.
because that would
that's fine.
constrain us as to what we can do with them later.
Agreed.
Fair enough.
Agreed. Okay, so we have 3 Astari present,
Mhm.
and then we can hear from at least one of the Blue Wizards so that we acknowledge that
Their
but we don't have
existence.
Will do we think will Radagast be there the whole time, or will he be kind of in and out?
I think he can stick around.
He can show up late.
It seems like
Yeah.
he would. Yeah.
He just kind of wanders in at some point and
He
is
seems like
like,
he'd
"Oh
be,
yeah, meeting, right? I was totally here for this, you guys."
He
Mm.
seems like he'd be a restless meeting attendee.
Mm.
Right. He just wanders out to get a drink of water whenever he feels like it.
I'd be interested to see
Getting some more
Gildor
coffee.
and Glory in here.
Yep. Gildor.
Mm,
Gildor, for sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Why not?
So that we recognize him, so that he's a character when we meet him.
We'll have some opportunity to do that,
We
but
get
why
plenty of
the
opportunities
White
to-
Council?
Why not?
But why? What does he have to do with the White Council other
He's-
than being a
He's
Noldo?
of the House of He's the representative of the House of Finneran.
Yeah, but the house doesn't exist anymore.
They
all died.
clearly does. He claims it.
You know what I mean. You know what I mean. He's a random Noldo who survived the first age. I don't know why he'd be part of the White Council.
Maybe there's a
Glorfindel I'll give you because he's very clearly loyal to Elrond and
there
he's
like
going
a-
to show up for Elrond stuff.
Is there like a 2-tier White Council? Like there's like there'll be like an inner group. That
It's
would
like
be
the Senate and the House of
Oh.
Representatives.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if the White Council meeting is happening during a larger social event, then literally any character who is alive at this time can be attending the random festival in Eregion that we're just holding for festival purposes
Right.
while the
Right.
White Council is
and
meeting.
they have no idea that the White Council is actually meeting, or that in fact that it
it's a
exists.
perfect disguise.
Right.
Do they
the
have like a
festival is-
masquerade ball? I mean,
Sure.
It's like the the masked Lords of Waterdeep.
It's like so many things. Okay. Um,
We don't have to do that. But if you want to include random characters who have no business at a White Council meeting,
Oh my gosh.
we could give a bigger group.
So, who has business at a White? What is the White Council?
Well, wouldn't it be?
Galadriel, Celeborn, Gandalf, Saruman, Radagast, Círdan.
They get mentioned, but
Why are we? I think we can I think we can exercise some discretion here and add some people. Like, it seems like
we could add some people.
Wouldn't it be some of the same people that went to the Council of Elrond?
Yeah.
No dwarves though,
so.
Probably.
I was going to say, why don't we let's get somebody from Erebor?
Well, I was going to invite Thranduil for sure.
Yeah, Thranduil.
He could
invite.
And Legolas. Is Legolas
you can send
coming?
Legolas?
Well, I can see Legolas showing up, and it would not shock me to find that Balin was in the area investigating things prior to the actual move to Khazad-dûm.
So we have Balin flirting with Khazad-dûm.
Right. Yeah. If we wanted to have a dwarvish presence there, and near Ninth, we might want a dwarvish presence there.
Yeah. So, the thing is, though, knowing what we know about all these characters, if they're going to form a Council of the Wise, are they really going to invite representatives from everywhere in Middle Earth and like get someone from Gondor and Rohan and Mirkwood to show up, or are they just going to be like, we're smart, we're going to get together in a room and figure it out ourselves? Because I kind of feel like they're a little bit more elitist and not so much on the democratic side.
Well, that's why I was
less elitist, but the rest of the group, Elrond and Radagast are the two non-elitists in here.
Right.
And, okay, Círdan.
That's why
he'll work with anyone.
I tossed out the 2-tier thing. Maybe there's like the auxiliary White Council, which like some extra people. And then there's like, a couple days of closed meetings of just like the inner circle.
Yeah.
But if we did something like that, that would give us an excuse to invite some other people.
Because both Saruman and Galadriel are not going to see the benefit of inviting everybody to this meeting.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
No, you're right. You're right.
The Off-White Council.
Yeah, you would go Off-White Council.
It's terrible.
The Off-White Council meeting is where the serious drinking happens. Like that's
well, and so when I'm thinking about, for example, Balin, I'm not thinking of him actually being a part of the council meeting. I'm thinking about him being in the area and having a conversation with somebody.
Could be,
but if this is a White Council meeting and that alone, this is probably a pretty secret thing. I don't think a lot of people know about the existence of the White Council, much less where they are.
I'm not convinced it's a thing, like really a thing, like a full formal thing. So here, in part, I'm thinking about like the history of the White Council in Tolkien's imagination. Right?
Yeah.
When the White Council is mentioned in The Hobbit, it is very clear that the White Council is a professional organization of
wizards.
Right. I mean, it's like the American Medical Association or something. Yes. Right. I mean, it's
Gandalf has to go report in. Right?
He's got to report into the guild, right?
Yeah,
the Guild of White Wizards, and Tolkien was still thinking this way clearly in the early drafts of the Lord of the Rings, when originally the Witch King, who was originally the Wizard King, which is a much more horrible name, is one of the White Council members who goes rogue, and that's why he and Gandalf are like, and of course, and that's what ends up inspiring the character of Saruman. Like, when the Witch King becomes something else, he's like, but I kind of like the rogue wizard idea, and boom, Saruman, right? So, So originally the White Council just is like, this is the group of good wizards, the professional organization of good wizards who gets together. And then it kind of morphed, but when it morphs into, I agree, Marie, with your elitist comment. I mean, it's just like, let's few wise people get together and make it. We're not going to canvass the whole continent for opinions, right? We're just going to get together and have this discussion. But I do think. But again, the problem is, one of the problems that I have with the list of people that we know were there, like, obviously we can include all those people, but I don't think that need be a complete list, right?
Sure. Because I don't think you need to be in a starry or have a ring to be at the White Council. Like, I don't think that's the requirement.
Right, exactly. I mean, because some of the characters were not even really, like, invented yet, when that came around. So,
but it has to be characters who would have an interest in sitting down at a meeting and discussing the fate of the world.
Job requirements. Would consider facing a Balrog in single combat.
Right.
So you don't have to have faced a Balrog, have a ring of power, or be in a starry. Like it's not like that's the requirement, and if you
Right.
don't meet that, we don't want
Right.
you.
Did you or do you or have you ever had a ring of power? Yes. If so, you're invited. Right. No, exactly. So I think I don't see any reason why we can't have a larger membership. I agree that we're not going to be making it. This shouldn't be like the UN of Middle Earth, right?
Yes, I agree.
So clearly, but yeah, but
Is it like
but
the
can-
UN Security Council?
I was just gonna say that. More
If
like
you're
the
gonna
Security
do that.
Council. Yeah, yeah.
It sounds like a rather strange country club. Well, yeah.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So okay, so but on that
Dwarves
basis,
need not apply. Oh, that's
Well,
awkward.
Who else would we want to include in the discussions? Gandalf, Radagast, Saruman, Elrond, accompanied by Glorfindel and Arwen,
Uh-huh.
right? We would want Círdan.
Mhm.
We don't need Galdor. He doesn't need to bring Galdor with him, though he could.
It would be interesting if for him to be present, though, because we know him.
Right. Galdor and Aristor are the two others who are like not necessarily important in themselves, but they're speakers
They
at the
could be
Council
there
of Elrond,
as part of
so.
people's entourages.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm fine with people bringing people with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Galadriel could even bring Celeborn. Sorry,
He should
that
be
was
there.
mean.
He should be there.
That was mean. I could have made a meaner joke, but
Our Celeborn,
our Celeborn is awesome. Our Celeborn is awesome.
present at the White
Totally
Council as a
deserves to be
member,
there.
full member.
Full member. Agreed. But yeah, like we don't have to bring like Haldir or other
No.
Galathrim with us
No,
necessarily.
but to go back to your question of is Thranduil invited? It's an important question because if you're really trying to get leadership potential to make a plan to do something, you'd think you'd want to talk to people like him or the brand new king of Rohan, or at least
Right.
send
But
out
he's not
feelers.
one of the wise.
Right. I don't think that's how most people would describe Thranduil.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really the kind of guiding star of who is part of the White Council is who do the people that we know are in the White Council consider to be the wise.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm laughing at Meow's suggestion. Can we have one episode where we have a White Council Zoom call via Palantir, please?
That sounds like a terrible idea.
The nearest
Evil
pa-
Dark Lord.
Okay, so there's definitely a Palantir in the Tower Hills at this time, so that one's available. The one from Weathertop is gone, so they can't use that.
Can't use that one.
Saruman has one, but he's not going to tell everybody that he's got it.
Yeah, there are some
Um,
available, but they're all hidden. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And all of them have a direct connection to all eyeball all the time.
Who just woke
like-
up, though.
I like the idea of them. They're doing this, and then like someone else dials in. They're like, "Hey, who is that?"
Wait, let me
dialing-
figure out how to mute him.
Who's dialing in? From...
Who
Nobody
shared the
knows
link?
how to manage their attendees, unfortunately. So yeah, yeah. Yes. The
Are you guys talking about My Little Pony?
well the
It's a deep cut silver
I
film
recognize.
joke.
I recognize that reference.
yeah.
But
Okay.
but if we do want to have a larger gathering that has some other purpose, and then the White Council meeting is happening in the context of that gathering,
Yes.
then we would have a lot of flexibility to do whatever we wanted with
Yeah,
characters.
And you could have this council meeting be a thing that's happening that nobody knows is happening because nobody should know.
Yeah, so it can be a secret meeting. I
Which
think.
means that if this is an elvish gathering, Saruman is not, his presence is not known to the general public. Gandalf could be there. But I feel like if people knew that Saruman was there, they'd know something was up.
Who?
What,
What people?
If there were other elves there,
okay,
present, and they saw Saruman walk in, it's like, okay, that doesn't happen a lot
because he doesn't travel.
Right, like Gandalf is all over the place, and so him being there is perfectly
being there and Radagast showing up 2 days late. Right.
No big
totally
deal.
Normal.
Yeah.
And Elrond and Galadriel being
Yeah. So especially if Galadriel is hosting this event and it's kind of in Elrond's backyard, like
one other issue with this being totally secret, it probably limits our ability to just like have random characters show up. With like,
yeah.
Oh, I have
no, they can show up for the festival
if there is
and they
thing.
can have contact with our council characters.
I can't decide whether or not I think.
So if the Harad brother comes to deliver news to Gandalf, he's coming because he knows Gandalf is at the festival, not I'm delivering news to the White Council.
Right.
If
we do that 2-tier thing, which sounds like you are not really comfortable with.
I'm dubious. I mean, I think it's fun, but I'm wondering. First of all,
I feel like
it strikes me that a festival of that kind, like a continent-wide general invite, that's a pretty bloody big deal, right? Yeah. I mean, like, that's a huge event to throw. That's like that's like the World's Fair or something, right? I mean,
yes, the Middle Earth World's Fair.
So considering the time period that we're involved in, the technology level and all that, this has got to be a year-long event.
Oh yeah, that was another thing I was thinking. This is not a weekend in a hotel conference room kind of session.
No,
that's good. That gives us flexibility.
These people live there for a while. It's like the Estelad, or the Thing,
and the elves have been planning it for 200 years.
Right, exactly. They've like built an entire city to host it in. Yeah.
That would also explain why maybe there aren't a lot of mortals invited. Because when they prepared the guest list, most of them weren't alive.
Yeah.
Well, the reason that there's no mortals invited is because of the continuity issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna invite, like, sure, this guy's wise right now, but then I gotta find another person.
he's wise today, but is he gonna be wise in 50 years?
We're alive.
Yeah.
Well,
by the time humans get any kind of wisdom, you got one foot in the grave. It doesn't it's not useful.
True.
Yeah. So we don't have to do the Olympic Village with the White Council meeting if people don't want an Olympic Village going on.
It is really attractive to bring.
I kind of like it.
I mean, I kind of like the idea of having the opportunity to bring lots of people together, especially in the way in which that kind of parallels the Union of Mithros and enables us to play off some of that stuff. But again, I'm not sure we're not biting off too much there. I mean,
that's my concern. There's
enough characters in the core council to
part of the whole,
which was the whole beauty
point was to make a little bottle thing where we only needed to have one set.
Yes.
For the frame this season. Like, here's your set. You can wander around the set and do all different things in and out of this council space, but it's all right here. And now we're like, yes, but there's a giant fair set over here. And people come in from all over.
Yeah.
This is how it happens. This is how
This is how it gets out of hand.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we might have to nip this one in the bud.
Okay. So to avoid
my bud nipper.
What we would have to do is say that each of the known White Council members brings a small entourage with them.
Yes.
Because they're not traveling alone, probably.
And that's how you get your 2-tier setup.
So there is a support staff for the White Council meeting.
Yeah, Galadriel's not cooking her own food.
No.
Like, that's just she's got people for that.
If we do this, do we plausibly believe that this is a secret meeting? All these people are traveling from all these places. People are going to see him traveling
The
there.
people who are,
But they're meeting in a deserted place. Aregian's not inhabited.
yeah, there's nobody there to see them all meet.
Except
Nobody-
for Crevane from Dunland.
Right.
And nobody's bringing an army, so we're not there. Nobody's concerned about like, well, what if a marauding band of orcs happens upon us?
I mean,
There's
all
a-
these guys together, I'm not really that like.
They all have brought some people, so they do have a security detail.
So
Alright.
let me ask you this, Dave. How many people in do we think that Glorfindel by himself can handle
That's
with
true.
no support whatsoever?
That's true.
Then we go to Galadriel, Saruman,
Yes.
like
Glorfindel, the one-man army.
Yeah.
like
yeah,
we're
it's
talking
fine.
about hundreds.
Yeah.
Who
that's
in
it.
Middle Earth is going to be attacking this gathering?
Right.
A really dumb orc, okay?
And I suppose
troll.
maybe
Trolls are
Suppose
not
maybe-
smart.
what we could also do is we could have Sons of Elrond with
Mhm.
bands of elves and Dunedain.
Running a
Kind of mouth-
screen.
Yep,
Yeah.
running a screen.
And that's where we get our Aragorn cameo, is
Uh-huh,
because
there
we
we
know he's
go.
gone out into the wild. And who's he going to start with? He's going to start with Sons of Elrond and the Dunedain, the people he knows.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Aragorn is also part
Yeah.
of the defense team. Because this is so early in his going out into the wild, he doesn't have a direction or a purpose yet. He's not really doing his own thing.
And you can trust him and Halbarad with the information that there's an important gathering going on. Nobody else has to know what's happening or
Yep.
where it's happening.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like when we make contact with Aragorn, it's like in the dead of the night, way outside of where the
Yep.
of where the meeting is being held.
Yeah.
So we don't have to worry about.
And does Aragorn get to deliver the news that we just like killed some spies from Mordor? That's real weird. What are they doing out here?
Yeah. And it
Should we be
turns out that
concerned?
they actually work for Sauron.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, yeah, this sounds like this actually I think this works pretty good.
If
Yeah.
they
This is pretty-
do run into villains of some sort, they're probably from Moria,
Yep.
because that's where the biggest pile of orcs currently resides,
True.
in that general area. So they're
And
not
it's right
spies
up the
from
road.
Sauron. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's not going to, and well, okay, we could have some spies from Sauron. Like obviously there could be werewolves or something,
Well,
right?
I'm thinking like I'm thinking the only reason I mentioned that is just something that like, you know, like stumbling on orcs from Moria seems like we're over here, that makes sense. But like if you
Something weird that doesn't
You
belong.
need
Yeah.
something sinister is what you're looking
yeah, something
for.
sinister
Mhm.
that doesn't add up, that like should add to the concern that
Mm.
that the forces of evil are coordinating and are
If-
are somewhat aware of what we're doing.
Well, Galadriel can mention that Dol Guldur is not still safe.
Yep. Yes.
Like, 'cause she cleared the place out and it was good for a minute,
Yep. Now reoccupied.
but it's reoccupied.
Or
And
Radagast could, because he's right there.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like,
So
the
he could be
spiders are
like,
overrunning my house again.
Right. So he can be
Exactly.
like, that's not, not yeah,
Galadriel's
he
like,
could
so
say it's
good
not-
news, everybody. I cleared out Dol Guldur, and Radagast is like, about that.
But yeah, there's definitely
can
hearth
we
fires running in
have
Dol Guldur.
Yeah, I need a re-up on my Orkin
Yeah. Yes.
contract. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Not visited recently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and I figure if we decide at some point we're like, wow, it'd be really great if we had a messenger deliver news about this thing, we can find a way to pull that off.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, especially since, I mean, Gandalf is our ace in the hole where it comes to any of that stuff, right? Because
Yep.
Gandalf has been everywhere and knows everybody. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And
Okay.
people might think to look for him over on this side of the continent.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is pretty funny. Like, you know, this is one of those like thanks Tolkien situations where it's like he just, you know, like why is it? How come we don't know where this was happening?
Right. Well, so, okay. So one of the things I was just looking at was like the trajectory of the White Council. So in Appendix B, Tolkien mentions 4 White Council meetings. The White Council is formed back in 2400, in the same year, coincidentally, that the ring is found by Diegol. So, like 500 years ago, the White Council was formed. It doesn't say a thing about why or what they did or said at that first meeting. They just got together for crumpets or something in 2400, and then the next meeting happens in like 2850-ish, and that's when Gandalf says, "Hey, let's like drive this necromancer dude out of Dol Guldur," and Saruman's like, "No, let's not." And then they meet again, of course, in the year of the Hobbit, and then Saruman says, "Okay, fine, I agree. Let's drive the necromancer out of Mirkwood," and then we have this meeting, right? So this is the 4th and final meeting of the White Council here. So the idea of like increased paranoia, increased tension among the members, and increased paranoia, like this group has a whole history, and this is the last time they're ever going to meet, right?
Right. So they're going to lose faith in each other a little bit.
Yeah.
Based on past history and current events.
Yeah.
And if this was supposed to be, we're the world's last hope to defeat Sauron, and we can't even agree with ourselves as to what we should be doing to defeat Sauron, let's just let it go for a while and see what happens. That's a really weak final note to end on. That's the White Council failed. Like right at this point, it's very clear that, okay, they cleared out Dol Guldur, but it's already reinfested 10 years later. They did nothing. So in the 500 years they've existed, what do they have to show for themselves other than we are watching and waiting to see what Sauron's going to do?
Right, exactly. And that's actually a really interesting. It's really interesting to compare that with the Union of Mithros, which seems much more positive and proactive, but also in the end fails. And so having the White Council be basically declared a failure at the end, and this is one of the reasons why I feel like the White Council should be more of a, not just, hey, we know some wise folks, let's get together and talk occasionally, and when we do, we'll call it the White Council, right? Like, the White Council needs to be like an initiative that is now petering out and failing and coming to an end, right? To say a bunch of really wise and powerful friends got together to see if they could do something about things, and in the end didn't, that's more like a personal failure. It's, if you see what I mean, rather than like an institutional failure. This should be like an institutional failure of the White Council. Saruman's a huge part of that, of course, but he can't be the only part of that.
No,
because they would just reconvene without him if that were really the issue, right?
We're just gonna,
Well, what's interesting is that a version of the White Council does reconvene without him, but none of them plan on who's going to be there. They all happen to be there. I wonder how that happened.
Right.
That's very interesting.
It's just a random chance, I assume, but
right.
Right. So that's the White Council as it should have been.
Exactly.
Which does have people from all over represented and giving voice to the current dilemma.
It's
so that's what
significantly
this one,
more democratic.
So that's what this one can't be. Like, it's not that I was opposed to a meeting with people from all over.
No,
I just didn't want it to be the Council of Elrond.
Right. No, I hear that.
Yeah,
that's
good
exactly
point.
Right.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because I think that's the exact mistake Galadriel would make.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah. Okay. So
she's also not at the Council of Elrond.
She's also not at the Council of Elrond. Right. Exactly. So in fact, it turns out vote Saruman and Galadriel off the council and everything's much better then. Like that, then you really start moving.
And replace them with Merry and Pippin.
No.
Or at least Frodo and Sam,
or Gimli and Legolas.
Yeah.
Or
Bilbo.
Boromir. Like that's Bilbo. Yeah, like
Count
there were
Bilbo.
people at the Council of Elrond that were from many different backgrounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not all of whom
Um,
would have been considered wise by any measure.
Like a gardener, for example.
Right.
I
I mean,
mean,
of course, he wasn't invited.
he wasn't
Wasn't
invited at all.
Right.
He was just there.
Okay, so do we
Which is your
want to
point.
wait? Let's think more about these. Well, it's getting late, and we're not going to have time to flesh out a whole detailed story. But thinking just about a few more elements here, we know the Saruman issue. I think it would be interesting to have. We know that there's Gandalf-Saruman tension, and even Saruman to the Gandalf-Galadriel alliance tension.
Yes.
Right, as we discussed. I think it would be cool to show that it's partially Gandalf's fault. That is to say, Gandalf isn't just innocent. It's not like Gandalf is awesome and Saruman is horrible, right? That
Well,
like,
I'll bet you he's keeping stuff from them.
yeah,
Like
both of them are keeping
he
stuff from the
could
council.
report the existence of a magical ring.
A magical ring, which could very possibly be one of the Great Rings.
Yeah. He could report that information, and he doesn't.
Well, the problem is, if it's a great ring and you've seen it and you know it doesn't have a gem on it, there's really only one great ring it could be.
Right. Right.
So,
According
But
to
he
Saruman's
knows-
testimony, yes.
yes. But I'm just saying, Gandalf can't mention, hey, I know this hobbit who has a magic ring.
Oh,
Yeah.
he can totally believe he has reasons for keeping that information.
Yeah. Right, but he is
Secret.
keeping that. Yeah.
Right.
But he's totally keeping it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And by the
Doesn't
way,
he also,
I do.
doesn't he doom this whole endeavor from the beginning by refusing to be the head of the council?
Well, so
I'm not sure he refused. Galadriel wanted him to be in charge, and Saruman ended up in charge. Saruman arrived in Middle Earth first.
So the
Yes.
big question: who supported Saruman?
Yeah.
Radagast, because Radagast.
They're
I think
buddies,
Radagast.
right?
Yeah.
What-
Radagast came over with him.
Yeah.
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 And
Radagast-
possibly Círdan. Círdan
Well,
would have met them
Círdan
all when
gives
they first
Gandalf
arrived.
the
I know.
ring, so
Círdan clearly actually prefers Gandalf, but maybe in the interest of forming a council, he sees Saruman as more the leadership, run a meeting type.
so also I think that Elrond might have initially thought that Saruman thought more the way that he does.
it would be interesting to have Elrond have been a Saruman
Yeah.
supporter.
I mean,
It's almost inevitable that he must have been.
yeah.
Right. If Galadriel and Elrond and Círdan were all pro Gandalf,
Yeah.
then
We would have gotten Gandalf.
we would have
Yeah.
gotten
Yeah.
Gandalf clearly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I think that he may have seen Saruman as a kindred thinker and a person interested in how the pieces are moving with each other and how it all works. And I think by this point, I would say maybe he thinks that was not the right way to go.
So, if according to my recent theory of what being the White Wizard means, right? My recent theory is that to be the White Wizard, like the job description attached to being the White, is you are the leader of the anti-Saruman forces or Sauron forces. Like your job
Yes.
is to that would be an ironic job for Saruman.
Yeah.
Your job is to oppose the enemy, to lead the opposition against the enemy.
Yeah.
Right.
And so by appointing him the head of the White Council and making him thereby, I would say, Saruman the White, he is what people have exactly said is not just you run a good meeting, we'll put you in charge for like logistical purposes, but rather like you are the one who is going to be metaphorically and quite likely eventually literally leading us into battle against Sauron. So like
Right.
that's the qualification I think that Saruman has to show that he has. I mean, and I take this judgment based primarily on the way that Gandalf talks when he's the White. right?
Yeah.
If he, when he is acting as Gandalf the White, is Saruman as he should have been, he's showing us what
Yes.
Saruman ought to have been doing.
Yes.
Right, and wasn't doing. And the fact
And-
of what also, like, Saruman's research into the Rings of Power looks like him doing his job.
Yes.
Right.
And
He's not,
setting up
but it looks like
setting up a stable place where he's going to be. Like, you can find Saruman.
Yes.
It's
He's the
easy to
captain.
find Saruman.
Yeah.
Right. Gandalf is not leading the order.
Right.
He's not leading the White Council, because you can't just go and talk to him.
right.
You have to wait for him to show up at your door.
Right. Because you never know where he's going to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Which it turns out is exactly what the White Wizard should be doing, but
Right.
Sure. The idea of what looks like leadership, though, Elrond has seen how Gil-galad was High King. That's his standard for leadership, I would imagine. So if
I
he
would
had
think
to
so.
choose between Radagast, the guy who hangs out in the woods and talks to birds,
Yeah.
Gandalf, the pilgrim who walks around all the place and you don't know where he is ever, and also maybe comes across as a little bit eccentric and forgetful. Like, Gandalf has a persona that is like, oh, what's going on here? Which is not real,
And
but
short-tempered and
yeah, like he
Yeah.
has a
Yeah.
persona that's like, wait, how trustworthy is this guy?
Yeah.
Until you get to know.
not very much.
Yeah. But at first impression might
Yeah,
have been not
yeah.
great, and then
looks a little squirrely. Yeah.
and then Saruman is like, let's get all the lore together. I'm gonna establish a home base. I'm gonna make friends with the Steward of Gondor and the King of Rohan. Like, he seems to be building things up and getting it in place to prepare for the action. But then when they get the council together and say, what are we going to do? He says, no action needed at this time.
Right.
And they're like, but it's your job to do the action bit.
Right.
Yeah.
So
And
I think that's what the dissolving is looking like here.
I agree. Yeah. I think the Gil-galad parallel is very good. That makes a lot of sense. That he would strike Elrond as the most Gil-galad-esque of the candidates.
Yeah. At first impression, obviously, once Elrond gets to know Gandalf, they become good friends, and Elrond's opinion of him would improve over time, presumably.
Right.
He still has to chastise him at the Council of Elrond. So Gandalf is still very much doing his own thing that Elrond didn't sign off on.
Right. Yes, exactly. And I mean, that, I think it's perfectly sensible for us to depict, like, when that Gandalf turns out to be the leader of the good guys, that he turns out to be, Saruman as he should have been, is itself an underdog story. Is like,
Yes.
That's a eucatastrophe in itself that nobody would have seen coming.
The uneducated viewer should not see it coming, in fact.
No. I mean, and I was going to make a joke about it's too bad we can't actually cast Sylvester McCoy as Gandalf, but I won't make that joke. Anyway, but yes, like we to have Gandalf seeming unreliable, uncertain. What Galadriel sees in him should be kind of unusual. Like, she wants Gandalf, she wanted Gandalf to be the leader. Everyone else would have thought that was insane. Well, if not insane, anyway, a pretty off the wall suggestion of Galadriel. I don't think, again, as you say, Elrond they're gonna become friends. They're gonna get to know each other better down the road, but he wouldn't necessarily be on board. And anyway, and even Círdan, who gave him the ring, so clearly has some respect for him, doesn't necessarily see this as his role, right? Like, that's not what he's like. The speech Círdan makes when he gives Gandalf the Ring of Fire is not like, and go lead the good guys into battle against the enemy with this. Like, that's not what it's for, right? Exactly.
No, the whole kindling hearts thing sounds like a support role.
Yes, exactly.
He's the healer in the party.
Yes, that's it. Yes,
He's like the 4th edition warlord from 4th edition D&D, which nobody played, so nobody gets the reference. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So, what else? Any other issues or kind of plot lines that we want to put in or develop here? Besides the fact that if it's going to take place in Eregion, we have to have like Galadriel talking to the stones at some point. Just saying. If Legolas can
stones
hear
of
what the rocks are
Eregion
saying, Galadriel's
remember
going to
the
have
elves, yeah.
a full-on conversation with them. But or like Elrond, would be hanging out with them and they'd recognize him. Anyway, but apart from small details like that,
Are there any characters that you don't want to show up in this frame?
Gollum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where is he right now?
Stop! It's not serious.
he's
No. But I mean, he was in Mirkwood
in
a few
season
years
2.
ago. Yeah, that's like 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember when he gets caught.
He would probably be in the Greater Erebor region by now, probably, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah, I don't remember when he's captured.
I was just naming somebody that I had no
Gollum-
expectation whatsoever would be there.
Gollum meets Shelob in 2980, which is the year that
The engagement.
Yes, that's how we're going to end off the first age here. So we have the opportunity to show what Gollum is up to in our final frame for season 1 or for first age.
Yep.
Are Gollum and Shelob a parallel for
something?
Yeah.
For something
in Arendelle and Ungoliant.
Oh, are we going to have
there is that.
the death of Ungoliant? Yeah, okay.
We're going to have the death of Ungoliant.
Okay.
Same season. Just saying.
Anyways.
Okay. Yeah.
The point is, yeah, so there are certain things we're not going to get into.
Yeah. That's one of them. No hobbits, I think.
No hobbits.
Yep.
Yeah. No hobbits.
Unless we want to have like just like a took out on an adventure. Maybe
it's pretty far afield for a took adventure.
Yeah.
What if Gandalf just
brings the hobbit with him?
Everyone shows up with their little.
Oh my gosh! It's old Took. Oh no! Old Took's old now. Yeah. That doesn't make any sense. But if this, I would love to see
Gandalf show up with
Gandalf showing. No, well, I'd love to see Gandalf showing up with like the old Took at his side at some point, because that would be really entertaining.
Also, shouldn't we do something with this with the comment that Bilbo makes at the beginning of The Hobbit about Gandalf being responsible for lads and lasses going off on adventures?
Yeah,
it's too late for that, unfortunately. Though we're already post Hobbit.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like in sometime in like the late Third Age stories, we got to find an excuse to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I think we can have early days of Gandalf in the Shire, and we can certainly have
drop
Gandalf
references.
taking some tooks on adventures later on.
But yeah, Bilbo having gone on adventure is the adventure that we've.
Do we want to see Bilbo?
I mean, if he's going to bring a hobbit, it would be Bilbo.
It would
most
be
likely.
Bilbo.
The thing is,
At this point, you're right. Yeah.
Gandalf's hobbit friend right now is Bilbo.
Yep. So if he's gonna bring somebody,
But
yeah.
I think he should show up alone. That's the thing, is everybody else has their people and their entourage, and Gandalf's just wandering around on his own.
Gandalf being
He
the
does.
weird loner.
Yeah, like
the
that's what he
weird,
does.
Eccentric loner.
Like
Yeah.
Radagast in that way.
Yeah.
Like Radagast isn't going to bring people with a busy. He might bring pets.
He might bring
Yeah,
some
he brings
pets.
pets,
He'd
totally.
definitely
Yeah.
bring pets.
There you go.
But he also kind of looks like he is Saruman's entourage. So, I mean,
Right. Right.
Radagast is the entourage.
It's Wormtongue's dad.
Galmod.
Galmod, yeah. That's a reach.
it's a deep cut right there. Yeah. Okay. All right. I think we're good. I mean, obviously there's a lot more to resolve, but exactly how we have it play out, I think, is doable as we work through the episodes and think through. I mean, we're obviously not really close to an outline, but we don't need to be.
No, some of the main decisions were supposed to be what's the main point of what's happening, who's our point of view character, where's the story taking place, and we've answered most of that. Although, who is our point of view character for this frame?
Galadriel.
The fact that you didn't say the same name means we probably should talk about that.
Probably.
I guess it can't be Arwen because she won't be at the actual meetings.
Why not?
She could be.
She can be there without
be there.
necessarily having a.
She is on the top of my list of people who don't have a bigger role because she wasn't invented in time. Like, she didn't get retconned
Right.
into things.
Like, her name's not there
I see.
because
I see. I
she
see.
had been in, she didn't exist when the list was made.
Okay.
but
But that's
but
not
I
her
don't
fault.
think. But we also just did her story in the last season, so we probably want to shift the point of view.
I
back
don't want
to
to make her the
Galadriel
point
now.
of view character for that reason.
Yeah, I think.
What if
I
we-
think Galadriel's a better choice.
Glorfindel.
I was going to say, what if we choose a more minor character, not one of the major characters at all?
So our point of view character can talk to all the major characters.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it should be one of the big.
All right, and Glorfindel appears in the main story this season because we'll go to Gondolin a few times throughout the season. So Glorfindel's not a bad one. And you'll think like, oh, we've seen him in the frame. We know he survives.
Sucker.
And then everyone will be really confused by the continuity when we kill him off in a few seasons.
Which is just where you should be with Glorfindel.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, and of all the people to have contact with the security detail outside, Glorfindel is pretty high on my list.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So Glorfindel meeting up with Aragorn or the Sons
Yeah.
of Elrond makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love
And
it.
any messengers coming to the camp would go through Glorfindel, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now I really,
He's head of intelligence.
There
I
you
now
go.
really want to find an excuse to have Gandalf show up somewhere in a later story, main story, with Bulror Tuck in tow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
Again, it'll depend how much third age story we decide to tell.
And someone asks Gandalf who that guy is, and he says, "That's my bodyguard." Yeah. Yeah. No. Exactly. No, it's good. That's good. Okay. So good. Yeah. Glorfindel. Let's do Glorfindel point of view. We didn't talk much about how hope specifically gets worked, like how the theme connects.
Well, I think the way the theming connects is they're trying to build a coalition in the same way. They're trying to
the perils with the Union
create-
of Mithros are pretty cool.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're
And the
trying
failure's
to,
the same.
right. They're trying to create the victory, the path to victory on their own, and it doesn't work because this isn't what Iluvatar has in mind.
Yeah.
And it's the same. It's the parallels very, very
Right.
close.
And then they just have to try, because it's gonna be, if you could say it this
Glor-
way. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, Glorfindel can very easily be the voice of "Day Shall Come Again."
Mm.
Right.
Like, I don't have a problem with giving Glorfindel that level of
Right.
That's
Yeah.
Estelle.
true.
Yeah.
Because,
That's true.
I mean, why is he even in Middle Earth right now? It
Yeah.
has to
That's-
be Estelle reasons. Like, he
Yeah.
doesn't need to be here. This is not his fight.
That's
Yeah.
true. If anybody really understands that concept, it's him.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was going to say, thinking of the parallel that we were making before about how the Council of Elrond is like the White Council as it should have been. The White Council, the White Council meeting can be like the failed Umdir Council.
Yes.
The Council of Elrond is the Estelle Council.
Right.
Yeah.
All the
Yes.
way.
Yes.
Right. And
That
so
is
that's
true.
that they perceive that that's the only path forward at the end, even though it's not going to be played out until the Council of Elrond. But
Well, all we need to do is find a way to point to the Council of Elrond somehow. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is off the top of my head.
Okay. So let's say
1 o'clock in
Arwen
the morning, but yeah.
is very disappointed by the outcome of the council, and Glorfindel is trying to encourage her, and she can be like, "We needed to do this. We need to get all this all together. If it doesn't happen, we're all going to lose. Everyone's going to die. This is terrible." And Glorfindel can be like, "Big picture here. That's not how this story ends. Like,
Yeah.
this didn't like it didn't go the way you wanted, but we'll find another way. Like, there will be another way."
yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, "But what?" And he's like, "Oh, we can't see it yet. Like, we'll get there. Now wasn't the time. Day will come again." Like, Glorfindel can point her in the direction of, you don't give up just because the first thing didn't work.
Yeah.
Right.
Young child.
It would be interesting if he very, very obliquely prophesied the her eventual marriage.
Yeah. He's a prophetic voice kind of guy.
Yeah.
And he's like, what is he doing in Middle Earth? He's choosing to hang out with Elrond, who is a descendant of Turgon.
Mm.
Like, it's possible he's doing the same job as when he helped rescue little Eärendil from the fall of Gondolin.
Yep.
Like, he's still on duty.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, so if he's looking out
Mhm.
future, I'm aware of that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll come up with something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Excellent. All right. Well, I think that's a good plan. So, the next session will be in 2 weeks on November 16th. And it's time to begin working out more of the details of the stories we're going to be covering. We have the general plan. We have the whole big scope. We have the general plan. We have the frame concept. Now it's time to basically start working towards an episode outline for the season. And so in order to do that, we need to refine the primary stories, what exactly we're going to cover, so that we can figure out how to bring that stuff together into the episode outline. And then we'll be ready to start thinking our way episode by episode through. Mm-hmm. So next time, Hurin and Huor. Hurin's our point of view character, so we want to define their story, and that way everything else will be fitting in there. The Gondolin stuff, the Easterlings stuff, all those, the Mithros stuff, even all that stuff will be fitting into the Hurin and Huor story next time. All right, very good. Well, thanks everybody. That was fun, and we will look forward to getting back into the main plot in a couple weeks. And I will say, in the meantime, thanks for listening, and Godspeed.